Hi, and welcome to another edition of WCM's Outdoor Hospitality Update. I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground magazine, and of course, my esteemed co-host is Mike Gast, former vice president of communications at Campgrounds of America, and our current editor and writer for RVTravel.com. You've been doing some great work, Mike, on the RV travel side. I know we had a story up from you yesterday that was great on the outdoor recreation industry getting the recognition for all the money it contributes to the economy. So
it's been a lot of fun changing seats here and being able to write about the industry in such an open way and going places where I just haven't been able to go before. So it's been a lot of fun, kind of explaining the RV industry side to the RV traveler.
Yeah, yep. And then our guest today is Dyana Kelley, the president and CEO of CampCalNOW, RV Park and Campground Alliance, CampCalNOW for short, and which represents campgrounds in California. And you also do a little bit. You have some campgrounds from other states as well, too.
We do. We have campgrounds. We have members in Washington, Oregon, and Nevada.
Washington, Oregon, and Nevada. There were rumors that Nevada might get its own association. Is that gonna? Maybe.
I haven't heard
put
anything.
You on the spot.
Maybe, yeah. I know that, Oregon tried for a while. I think Washington tried for a while, and I don't know that, that has ever taken place.
Yeah, it's tough.
They were all a part of the California Travel Parks Association at one point in time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's tough for some of these states to get an association going. I know Georgia has got one going now. So, but state associations are so important to help represent the state. And it's great that CampCalNOW is able to work with some of those states and help them with some of the things they're dealing with. So that's great. But Dyana, you know full well, going through COVID, we were just at the CampCalNOW Summit about a month ago, maybe a little over a month ago, and you spoke on all the work you did with COVID, and you guys were actually recognized for your COVID response, I guess, by the tourism board or government officials, right?
Actually, by the governor's office, yes.
By the governor's office.
So,
okay.
We would have these meetings with the governor's office on a regular basis, and there were all these entities, restaurants and me and, hotels and lodging and all these different entities, fighting to figure out what do we do? How do we get open? What are we supposed to do? And I was able to submit to them, outdoor recreation guidelines, and here's what we think, and here's what we want to do, and have meetings with them. And then in one of the large meetings with the governor's office, one of the officials actually recognized me and our organization and said, if you want to get open, you need to do it like, CampCalNOW. If you want to know how to do it, they look to them because they did it right.
That's great.
So that was pretty awesome.
I know, Dana, I was involved with KOA. I was involved with KOA in the end of that, at the start of that process when we had longtime campers stranded all over the South trying to get home. You had Canadians that were in the wrong spot. I don't know if you could be stranded in California, but people were, and they just had a hard time getting home. Do you think we're better positioned now with camping kind of as an established essential business? Do we have that essential tag now that we really want if this ever happens again?
We do. And that was one of the hardest things to overcome in those early days was that, I know one of the first phone calls I made where I said they're kicking people out of RV parks. And one of the representatives said, well, just tell them to go to a rest area. And I'm like, you want to take people that have a clean facility where they're hooked up to sewer, they're all established, they live there, and you want me to tell them to take their RV and go to a rest area where there's no facilities? And so one of the first things I had to do was actually get the governor's office to understand that people live in these parks, and there's like 1 million full-time RVers on the road. They have to have someplace to go. We can't just tell them all to go to a rest area. Some of these people don't have another home. They live in their RV permanently all the time. And so that was a big learning curve, for sure. They just didn't grasp that there were actually people like living in RV parks and living in their RVs full time.
Well, let's talk about that image problem that RVing and camping probably has, and it stretches not just the problem you just voiced, but also on those people that are trying to create new locations for RV parks. That there's a lot of pushback sometimes in certain communities where they don't want an RV park in their backyard because they misinterpret what RVing really is. Do you think we're telling the RV story the right way to non-RVers?
No. I think we need more data, a lot more data. I think we need a better story for sure. Unfortunately, there's bad actors in all industries, right? And we are no exception. So we have people that have taken what was once a transient RV park and turned it into a full-time RV park. And maybe some of those are not as pleasant as they should be. So, none of us would probably want something degraded in our backyard either. So I get it, but we can't let those few bad actors, really tarnish the industry as a whole. I think the other thing that would really help is to be able to show how much money an RVer spends within a community. How often are they going out to eat? Are they going to the grocery store? Are they going on all the tours and are they doing wine tasting? Are they getting the souvenirs? What else is it that those RVers are doing? We look at that a lot with hotels and lodging, but there really isn't a lot of statistics that say, here's how much people are spending in a community when they stay in an RV. And a lot of times the communities think that, oh, they just come and they're in their RV and they don't participate in the community at all. And I think we all know that that's not really the truth. So we need data and statistics, and we need a better story. We need to be able to show, no, this is what an RV park really is. But that's a scary proposition when you're voting to whether or not to have an RV park in your backyard, because you don't know, is it going to be one of those really nice ones, or is it going to turn into this, long-term trailer park?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's definitely when we look at the news and when people are starting the development process, that's definitely something that neighbors complain about and that gets brought up quite a bit. And it's all over the country. It's not just in one location. And some of these RV parks are just beautiful, but some of them definitely have an image problem, or communities have dealt with an RV park that had an issue. And then a new developer wants to come in and they're like, no, we're not doing that again. So,
Right.
or we're not dealing with that again. So, yeah. So,
well,
Diane,
and we're actually having that issue here with some current legislation that we have on the table. And Ben, you and I spoke about this a little bit. So it's Senate Bill 869. It's been presented by Senator Connie Leyva.
Yep.
And what the bill is it would require RV parks to certify each of staff members that have any kind of management oversight. So anybody that's in any kind of management position. So basically there should be somebody on site at all times that has a management certification, and they would have to attend 18 hours of certification training to achieve that certification. The training would be paid training, and then the RV park would also need to pay housing and community development for their staff members to attend. The reason this came to fruition is that Senator Leyva has one of these bad actor parks in her neighborhood. And she's tried several times to, figure out how to get this park to clean up, or how to get it shut down, or what do you need to do to fix this situation. And so one of the things that they came up with was this education piece, with the idea that if somebody doesn't do it, HCD does have the authority to go in and shut the park down.
They could go and do the training and the park could still be the same theoretically, right? Or
theoretically, yes.
Okay. So do you know, would it be in person? It would be probably online training that people would be doing, or they haven't gotten that far?
What was proposed was online training through housing and community development.
And I guess, so what So I know the association's a little bit, you guys have spoken against it. I guess what's your concern about having to do that? I guess the training.
I am all about education. I'm not necessarily okay with housing and community development providing the education. I think that they are overwhelmed already. And so to add one more thing, I think would be difficult. I think it's pretty harsh to say if that certificate is not in your office, you would just get shut down automatically. There's the bill as it reads gives very little leeway for that process. So if you didn't have your certificate, maybe your staff attended, but HCD was backed up and didn't get your certificate. Now it's not up on your wall. You could get shut down. If you had a new manager start, but they hadn't gotten to the training yet, the bill is sloppy and not well written. And I think there could be a better process. I think the WMA, which is the Western Manufactured Housing Association, and I think, our organization could probably provide better training or adequate training with a better process. So it's not about the training, the education. It's that I don't think it's set up correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would definitely be an issue. We had one comment, William, and I can't pronounce that last name, Ollendorf.
That's Bill Ollendorf. That's from my past. He's a KOA owner out on the.
He said make the law to cover apartment rentals too. So apartment rentals are definitely an issue, I think, in most states as well, depending on the landlord. So,
but like you pointed out, then they could send their people to training, put the certificate up, and not change a darn thing, right?
Yep.
So
yeah. Yep. So, I guess one of the hot topics here recently too, and I just got your spotlight. It was kind of odd because I don't think it's going to show up, but your magazine, The Spotlight. Yep, you've got it. It was kind of odd because my wife handed it to me like 20 minutes before the show started. So
nice.
that was kind of neat. But I was just looking through it before the show, and I mean, it's amazing the work you get done, Dyana, and just all the different areas you have to focus on. And I know the gas prices and stuff has been an issue around the country. And you mentioned it in the spotlight too. I guess, are you concerned about how that's going to impact tourism in California this year, the gas prices, or are there other concerns?
I'm not too concerned about it. We haven't, from what the parks I've been talking to, we haven't started seeing a lot of cancellations based on that. Campgrounds are still full. I can tell you for sure that some of our, state and federal parks up here are already booked for the entire season. They're booked through till August. Weekdays, weekends, it doesn't matter. They are booked solid through August till the kids go back to school. So the only thing that might happen is people might stay a little closer to home, right? So instead of making that reservation that's 4 or 5 hours away, they might make it up the hill, at the more of a local campground.
So you've got a great seat to be in the front row for all of this new development. We got a lot of new money coming into the camping industry, a lot of new construction. I assume that you're getting contacted quite a bit by developers who want the information you have or want your advice before they launch into building a park and see how what the feasibility is. Is that really picked up? Do you expect that to start tailing off a little?
No, I don't expect it to start tailing off. We're still seeing a huge number of park sales and development as well. The problem with development in California is it takes a really long time. And there's just so many entities involved with the process that that's nothing that's going to, that's not going to be an overnight fix. It's a long process. I have a lot of parks that have started with an already existing park, and it's still taking 4 years, for them just to get open.
is there a magic number that you have in your head? How many sites are we short in California? What can we handle? What should the inventory be?
Oh my goodness. No, that's a great question. I wish I had an answer to that. I would say a lot. We're short a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just need a lot more campgrounds.
I thought it was interesting. I got to hear Toby O'Rourke last Thursday talk at the RV Industry Power Breakfast, and she spoke on the development front as well. And she mentioned that KOA plans 3 to 4 years for a new development, and she gave some pretty startling figures for the price of a campsite. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was $15,000 to $17,000 per campsite for a new development. And then I think it was about half that for an existing development. I guess it's just really expensive. And I have to imagine California is probably not the cheapest place to do that too.
Well, and there's a land issue, right?
Yeah.
RV parks, campgrounds, they take up a large swath of land. And we're really about building up instead of out, because hotels and lodging or cities feel like they can get a lot more for bang for their buck with a 10-story hotel than a large RV park. But I think RV parks bring a lot more to the community. There's a beautification process, there's natural landscapes, there's all of those types of things. But land is an issue in California for sure, and land is expensive. So even just getting the property is a lot. And then getting through the regulatory is a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah. And I think, when people think of California now, they also think of the wildfires. How has that, impacted development? And does that impact developers at all, the wildfires? Are they more careful, the locations they put their parks right now? Or is that not really a factor?
I haven't heard that as a factor, but I'm sure it's a consideration. I know of one park for sure that's had it's been for sale for a long time, that's had a hard time getting sold because it's just in a really delicate area, and chances of it going up in flames are probably fairly good, unfortunately. But it would be a great property if somebody would come in and clean it up and redo it. It's just, it would be a lot of money. And do you want to invest in that and then take a chance? So there is some consideration. I just haven't heard it being like the number one.
Yeah. How about the membership of your organization now? Is it, with all these sales and resales, you got to be in a constant recruiting mode. There must be a lot of faces changing on the ownership side in California.
There is, and that is one of the things that's most difficult for me. It seems as though when a park sells, it's really, really hard to engage the new owners and to provide the benefits of the association. A lot of times they're being bought up by, investment companies. So you can't even get to the right person to have that conversation. So there's definitely some challenges with these sales for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Bill corrected me. He said, Toby said that a complete campground will amortize to around $50,000 a site. So, so that's expensive. So
it's expensive.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and oftentimes, especially when I'm at the glamping or in the glamping space, people will ask me, I have a piece of land and I want to do this. I want to build this thing. And my first question is, how much money and how much time do you have? If you don't have the $15,000 that it's going to cost you for the first set of permits, then you shouldn't be in the business. And it doesn't stop there. It's, you start with the state, you've got county, you've got water boards, you might have coastal commission, port authorities, you might have water districts, like a lot of properties are owned by like a county water district. Maybe you're wanting to open something on Forest Service land. Well, now you've got the Forest Service, to deal with as well. So a lot of entities involved for sure.
So I guess kind of back to the wildfires. I know at the CampCalNOW Summit held at the beginning of April. That was kind of a big theme. You had a great panel, and you tackled a bunch of different topics from tree maintenance to insurance. And I guess what's the insurance market like for the park owners out there? What are they telling you about the insurance market? Is it getting more difficult to get insurance? Is it expensive?
Yes and no. Rates have gone up all over the place. Yes, it is getting challenging to get, but we also have the FAIR plan here in California. So if you can't get placed with, someone in a regular market, then you go to the FAIR plan, and the FAIR plan provides coverage. The coverage may not be as good as what you had the previous year. The coverage may be a little bit more expensive than what you had the previous year. So there's some things like that are taking place, but most people are actually able to get coverage. So, it was kind of a big myth, I guess, that people just aren't getting insurance. That's not quite the case. They are getting insurance. It just might not be what they've had in the past.
What's the season? We keep seeing reports of the drought continuing. I think you mentioned in your spotlight that the drought, you're still under a drought in some areas. What's the wildfire season look like? Is it going to be another bad one, or fingers crossed, hopefully it's not too bad? So,
I'm sure it is. And what a lot of people don't understand about forest management or forest fires is that when we've had this continued drought, the forest, the trees, the litter, everything is incredibly dry. So sometimes you go into the forest and you dig down into the litter a little bit, and there's all this moisture under there, right? We don't have that. Even the trees are incredibly dry. So even though they're still living, it doesn't take much for a fire to come through there and everything to just ignite. And that's caused by prolonged drought, by year after year after year of short water supply. So even though up here where I am, Folsom Lake is at 85%, first of all, it's not going to last because they're going to start draining it. But just filling it up this one year doesn't change the fact that everything is considerably dry. We haven't had the snowpack. We haven't had that, those underground aquifers we haven't had, all of this moisture that usually keeps us from catching on fire. So I do anticipate another challenging fire year for sure.
Are you encouraged by some of the work the state and the federal government are doing? It kind of feels like they're playing catch up to some degree, but are they doing the work to hopefully turn that situation around on the wildfire side?
We are starting to do the work here in California, but we had 100 years of doing something different, right? We've had 100 years of saying we're not going to let the forest burn, and now it's taken 100 years to realize, no, what we should have been doing all along was letting some of the forest burn, because what we did was really create unsurmountable conditions in our forest. And you can't go through, millions of acres of forest right now and go, okay, well, we're just going to clean this all up, right? So this is it's going to be a long process, but we are at least recognizing, what the problem is. And in certain areas taking some steps to fix that. Placerville, it was Pollock Pines, did a great job with some forest management and a team they worked with up there. And that's the reason that town is still standing today, because after the Tahoe fire last year, they should have been gone. But because of the team that they had and the forest management they did outside of that town, it's actually still standing.
Yeah.
So switching topics a little bit, as California goes, so goes the rest of the country. When we're talking about electronic vehicles, EVs, and campgrounds, what's your look in your crystal ball and tell us what's next in California for EVs? Thor just had their study came out a week or so ago with kind of gauging customer sentiment on EVs and what customers are going to demand. And one of the things I think that popped up was that the expectation would be that there would be a charging station, a rapid charging station on every site. are we so far away from that it's, we're talking 50 years, 20 years? What are we really talking where we'll start seeing EVs as a natural phenomenon on campgrounds?
I don't think it's gonna be that long. I think it's gonna happen a lot faster than we probably even anticipate. I mean, we are some time away from, electric RVs, right? All electric RVs, even though prototypes are out there, and I think we've all seen them. But I think it might be short-sighted to say I'm just going to put in a charging station. I think that as an industry, we all need to be thinking about changing the overall infrastructure of our park rather than just adding a charging station, because I do think that's going to be something that, that RVers are going to expect.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see, our tow cars, being electric and needing to be hooked up, and those types of things are going to become more and more prevalent. And if we're not providing access to those systems to charge those vehicles, it's going to be, really short-sighted. But that's a huge infrastructure. It's a huge capital expense, right? To say I'm going to come in and change all my pedestals. So it's not something that anybody's going to be able to just do at the drop of a hat.
Sure. Or to put pedestals on a cabin, that's going to be a big demand right off the bat.
Right.
Yep.
I think it's just something we need to start thinking about.
And it's been kind of interesting to see the RV industry really jump into the EV segment. And I mean, there seems to be news all the time from the RV industry on that front as well. So with these battery charging towing things that they have now, and the all electric RVs that they're prototyping and working on. So it's been kind of interesting to see how quickly the RV industry has been working on some of those things. So
absolutely.
I guess, what are some of the other initiatives you've been working on in the state? I know you have a really great relationship with the tourism board, which is awesome. You do a lot of work with them. You were just at the State House a week or two ago, right? Talking about stuff with the Tourism Association.
Where was I a week or two ago? I don't remember. I've been a lot of places.
You did their advocacy day, I thought, or something.
Oh, yes,
you went up there and talked about.
I did. We had advocacy day. We were actually in our local districts this time, though, because they weren't. They're redoing our capital area where we meet with all the legislators. So we actually went to the district offices. So yes, I did participate in advocacy day. To promote travel and tourism and bring an awareness of travel and tourism to all of our legislators. So yeah, it was great. And I'm actually heading to Tahoe tomorrow for Tourism Cares. So it's another conference about travel and tourism, and I'm hoping to do some networking and make some really good connections up there as well.
Now, do you do these trips for like partial vacations, or Lake Tahoe sounds pretty nice? So
Lake Tahoe does sound pretty nice, right? I'm actually filling in. Barb Newton is the executive director for Cal Travel, and she was unable to go, so I'm actually filling in for her for this one. But I jumped at the chance because I'm like, well, Tahoe doesn't sound like too bad a place for a conference, so definitely.
Why is it so important to be tied in with the state, other state groups like the Cal Tourism and different areas? You seem to have built a lot of bridges between those organizations, and it seemed to really help, especially during the COVID stuff that was going on.
Well, I think that overall, outdoor hospitality has not been well recognized in the travel and tourism industry. So it has been my goal since day one to make sure that we are a recognized and valued segment of travel and tourism. And I think oftentimes we get overlooked. We are, in general, outdoor recreation is like a $800 billion industry, and camping represents a great segment of that, and nationwide. And, we need to make sure that we're understood and that it's looked at as a valued segment. And so I do tend to speak a lot when I'm in front of the Cal Travel representatives. if I get an opportunity, I will absolutely stand up and speak on behalf of our industry, because I just think it's one of those stories that if we don't continue to tell it, it's going to get brushed away. And so I have to continue to speak for our industry on a regular basis.
And do you have any opinions on the generator issues in California, where the proposed law, I'm not even sure what the status of it is, but they were trying to ban those small 2-cycle generators out of RVs and other uses?
Yeah, I was actually just on with Michael Ox from RVIA today. We had a session just a little bit ago. It was on something else, but he and I've spoken about it pretty extensively. So this whole thing started with trying to ban gas-powered lawn equipment, right? So it wasn't really the RV generators weren't the target. They just sort of got roped in, being that the same type of engine is used. But at the moment, you're still going to be able to use your generator in California. You just won't be able to buy an RV with a generator installed in it in California. You can go to Nevada and buy one and drive it over here and stay in a park. So they aren't necessarily preventing us from using those at this point in time. Whether that comes down the line, it might. And we'd still love to have RV generators excluded from that. And I know RVIA is working pretty diligently to try and make that happen. But we haven't gotten any leeway on that yet. But the good news is, if there isn't something in place to replace that system, we have to keep moving the date out. So when we get to the next deadline, which I think is 2023, if there isn't something in place that says, okay, we have a replacement for that system, then we have to move it out 2 more years, and then 2 more years, and 2 more years. So until technology is really there, I think we're safe for the time being. But it's going to be one of those ongoing pieces of legislation that we're going to have to stay on top of.
How do you, I mean, it must be a constant job to keep up on top of all these legislative actions going on at the State House. I mean, it just seems like California is very active. So on the policy front.
Well, yeah, California's big on their regulations. So there's always a lot to keep up on. And at the same time, some of it hasn't been updated in a while, right? So we have our Special Occupancy Parks Act, which hasn't really evolved, and it hasn't caught up with what's happening in outdoor hospitality today. So there's other areas in the country that, you know, like NFPA 1192 gets updated every year, right? Well, we don't update our regulations every year. So we're a little bit behind the times as well. So while it seems like we're always moving and shaking and coming up with new things, we're also slow sometimes to get some of that stuff going.
I noticed
there's a large percentage of RV owners that, you know, at least read our RV travel site every week and comment on it, but they're very frustrated. These are longtime RVers, typically, that have been in the lifestyle for decades sometimes, and they're pretty sad about the loss of the old way, the being able to drive up at 4 o'clock and pick your site, and is it changed forever? Are we just, everything's going to be, you know, a year out to book now, especially in California? Is that just going to always be the norm of the lifestyle now? And is there no place left for these folks who've been doing it for 30 years and lamenting the loss?
I think it is going to be the norm. Unfortunately, I think, you know, we're only going to start seeing more and more of that. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where we've got enough campgrounds that, you know, we can go back to that, just show up on Friday and, you know, pick a site and, you know, and enjoy the weekend. It's just, I don't think it's going to happen. I think.
So what do you hear from the younger buyers that are just getting into this lifestyle for the first time? Are they happy with it? Are they disappointed with the hassles or the reservation problems or the lack of sites?
The younger, you mean like people like the van lifers type of people?
Folks that are just getting into their first RV and may not be familiar with the lifestyle.
No, they're a little bit more savvy. I shouldn't say savvy, because I don't want to say that people that have been doing this a long time aren't savvy. I would say that they are used to a different system. So they're used to going online, looking for the right property, booking their reservation online or using social media, and everything is contactless for them, right? And they're okay with that. People like me, I want to call the park, I want to get the owner on the phone, I want to show up and be greeted, and I want to, I want that whole thing, and they don't need that as much. They're okay, everything's online, they show up, they don't even need to talk to anybody, they've got their site, they're doing their thing. Or they're dispersed camping, or they're doing different things than the older generation that, like you said, would show up at their favorite park on Thursday and get their site and know the owner and the whole bit. So I think their expectations are different.
Yeah, definitely. I tend not to like to do the phone calls. So, you get me a good website and I can just do everything myself. And that's the way I like to camp. So
once again, Ben, you're the problem.
You're
I
the
know,
problem.
right? Exactly.
I'm the problem.
I just had a conversation with one of my park owners the other day, and I'm like, I still think a good old fashioned phone call is really important.
Well,
that's a good point. It's really changed the marketing of camping. We really, the old style, gosh, when I got into it 20 years ago, it was all magazine ads and kind of old school. And now it's all online. It's all search terms. It's very sophisticated now. And that has to change the way you have to educate owners.
Yeah.
It is. And I had this conversation with my SEO representative yesterday, in that, first of all, everybody has a campground search site. There's just thousands of them, right? And people have gotten more comfortable with just Googling something as opposed to, looking in a paper guide of some sort. It's very sophisticated. So even to get traction to your campground search site is challenging, right? Because there's so much out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's search terms, and it's activity, and it's people coming back to your site from other places. And there's so much involved with it that it's really complicated and really, really difficult. And if you don't have somebody helping you manage that, your site can quickly become not invalid, but, just a bit stale, probably. Just not a lot of traffic, and it just gets farther down on that Google list, right?
Yeah, definitely. I get Terry Broussard. Great points. Technology through the use of OTAs such as ours. He owns Spot Tonight, but there's also The Dirt, and there's a couple other ones out there. Capitalize on real-time visibility of vacant spots for immediate booking. Older campgrounds that do not use reservation systems are limited in how they can maximize their bookings. And he liked the CampCalNOW Summit. So
we were so happy to have them there. They had a great booth and they were super fun. And I won the TV in the raffle. So,
So what did you do with the TV?
It's in my room.
It's in your room. Okay. I didn't know if you needed a TV. So, well, that's great that you won that TV that they sponsored. So, but I guess you also talked a little bit about hip camp at the summit, and I did want to just get to that. I know we talked about perception earlier in the show about the industry. I guess, how does hip camp and other like boondocking sites and places like that, how does that impact the perception of camping? I guess some of these, especially on hip camp, aren't exactly legal, I guess.
Oh, this is a can of worms, Ben. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I shouldn't say most. A large percentage of the properties on hip camp in California are probably not actually permitted campgrounds. I won't say legal or illegal, but I will say they're probably not permitted campgrounds. How it impacts the perception, I don't really think it has an impact on the perception, because I don't necessarily believe that the same people that are going to a hip camp property would be the same people coming to one of our private campgrounds necessarily, right? There will be some crossover. There will always be some crossover, but you don't have your person with your 40-foot RV going to stay on someone else's property on a hip camp site, right? They're looking for amenities and hookups and things like that. So there's a difference in the demographic of people that are going there. But I do think it is opening the door to a different demographic of camper, maybe some new campers, maybe people that haven't really camped before are taking advantage of some of these smaller properties.
Yeah. I guess I meant on the perception end. I kind of meant on the public's perception of what camping is. Obviously, some of these hip campsites. I know we had a story last year about one that got shut down in California, where this guy had like 12 sites, and he almost had a full campground going. I think he'd even put in pedestals. I guess, when you have people like that, that might impact like the public's perception of what a campground is, I guess, wouldn't it? Just a little.
It could, if they're not operating, if they're not operating well. And the problem with those unpermitted campgrounds or unpermitted properties is that we don't know how they're being operated. We don't know how they're being managed. But, we have that same perception within our own industry too. So
yeah. Yep.
I don't know, honestly. That's a good question, if the public perception of camping is swayed by going to a hip camp property.
And then it sounds like, I think there was a county in California that was actually trying to find a way to make those sites legal, I guess. I forget which county it was.
San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
Hip camp is actually proposing some land use ordinance. So the county is in charge of land use. And so hip camp is proposing a land use ordinance that would allow anybody with a certain amount of property, a certain amount of land, to build sites on that land. The problem with it is that once they start building, they would technically need to go through housing and community development to complete that project. So like a lot of the hip camp properties, most of these probably won't ever have a permit to operate, but they will be operating anyway. Again, I'm not opposed to having more sites. I'm not opposed to expanding outdoor hospitality, which I think in some ways hip camp is good for that. But it's not fair for our owners and operators to be having to, for instance, send their management staff to paid training when you've got a hip camp property right down the street with maybe 12, 15, 20 tents that is not having to do any of that. Yeah. So that's where the disparity comes in.
So does the companies and operations like Harvest Host fall into that same category?
They do.
And I guess I've been keeping a close eye on Harvest Host and Hip Camp. And one of the things I've noticed, at least anecdotally online, is that they're almost a victim of their own success. As they've become so popular on the Harvest Host side, you start seeing comments made that we couldn't get in where we wanted to go, or people decided to make that their way of travel and they want to stay 2 or 3 days. And so there's all these conflicts that start coming up when their RVs start filling up the back ends of these parking lots. And it was a lot of fun when there was just a small percentage of people out there doing it. But now, as the boondockers, the people that prefer to travel that way and stay at a winery or stay at a golf course, they're kind of swamping the boat a little bit, and the satisfaction level and the expectation level is changing, I think, among the campers. They get there and they expect a campground experience, and they're kind of disappointed if they don't get it.
Right, absolutely. And I think that counties that are allowing this or considering to allow it are also underestimating what's going to happen. I think the more that we say, okay, well, yeah, this is okay, you're going to have these unpermitted properties popping up all over the place. And then you might have a perception problem, and you might have a fire problem, and you might have a garbage problem, and you might have a sewage problem, right? When you get 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of property next to each other and they're all doing the same thing, then that's a problem, right?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. I know there's a bunch of those types of sites popping up too. And I know that it's definitely attracting more attention from public officials. I think there was one for a church. I forget the name of it, but they were allowing RV parking in churches. And then, just people trying to find places to park, I guess, for the night. So it's kind of interesting how it all sprung up. So kind of
we had
quickly.
I had a really interesting conversation. So I'm doing these new coffee with the president kind of Zoom calls on Tuesdays. And so our call this morning was really about the RVIA seal and its implications here in California and what that means. And so a lot of people assume that, well, if it doesn't have an RVIA seal, I can't let it into my park. But that's not really the case. And right now we're seeing so many of these beautiful, van conversions and vintage trailers that have been redone, and giant custom RVs, the Bluebirds and things like that, that don't have an RVIA seal. So what do we do about that? Are we going to just, cut off that entire demographic of new campers because they don't have an RVIA seal? Here in California, part of our code states that any RV occupying a lot, and a lot meaning a site in an RV park, must have a seal or a label. Or HCD says label, RVIA says seal. So they must have that sticker saying that it was built to a certain standard. But RVIA does not have to provide that seal. It can be provided by another third party. You can also self-certify the vehicle. And additionally, because housing and community development are the ones that would be the enforcement agency technically, they would have to come out only on a complaint basis to determine if there was an RV that maybe appeared to be substandard. If the RV appears to be substandard, then they could go in and do an inspection and look for the seal. But it's not something that they would not tag the owner, or they would not tag the park owner. They would tag the owner of the actual vehicle. So if you have a substandard RV in your park, HCD comes in, they happen to go and inspect it, they find it doesn't have a seal for some reason, they can give the owner of the RV a citation, not the park. Okay. So we learned a lot today about RVIA seals and California regulations.
Well, that's cool. I mean, it's neat that you're doing those calls every Tuesday. I was actually going to ask how those are doing, but it sounds like they're doing well. Daryl from Pismo Coast, Daryl Sisk from Pismo Coast asked if they're archived, because he has a work commitment at that time every week. So are they archived, Diana?
They are not.
Okay.
Because I'm afraid if I archive them, then people won't show up for the call, and that will negate the call altogether.
So Diana, does your organization cover glamping too? Are you in tune with what's going on glamping and everything else that comes in under the umbrella of glamping?
Mike, I'm so glad you asked. Were you prompted to ask that question? That's fabulous.
No, I just came to mind.
So I actually am an advisor to the American Glamping Association. I work really closely with the AGA and also Glamping Hub. We have a couple of things that we're doing, one of which is a brand new program we have through Glamping Hub, where any of our members can actually dip their toe into the world of glamping by getting 2 to 20 tents. And the tent package comes with the platform, the tent, and all the furniture. It's at no cost to the owner of the park. It is set up as a rev share for a set period of time, depending on how many tents you actually get. And then Glamping Hub manages the reservation on that for that period of time. And after that, you own the tents and you move on. If you feel like it's something that's not working for you after the first year, you can actually return them. And basically there's no skin off your nose, right? Because it hasn't cost you anything to get into it. So there is an application process, but it's a great new program. We have about a dozen parks right now that are going through the process of getting those tents. So looking forward to that. We also are working with the American Glamping Association to be the first state chapter of the American Glamping Association. So we will also be the California Glamping Association. And we will be able to provide the same services, including our legal hotline and our propane discounts and everything that we do here to the glamping members as well. So expanding and diversifying our membership for sure.
So is glamping more complex in California?
No,
For everyone?
it's not, because it's still considered a campground. You know, it's still under the same regulation. I think the complexity comes in the accommodations, right? So when you're talking about glamping accommodations, most glamping businesses would like to have a bathroom in their soft-sided structures. That's not something that's allowed in California. So the complexity comes in figuring out ways to make that work. And I have seen it working. HCD has done a great job at actually working with some huge glamping organizations to really make that kind of come to fruition. And there's ways to do it, but you have to be creative, and you can't just go in and say, this is what I want to do, and if I can't do it, then I'm not doing it. You have to say, well, how can I make this work? What can we do? What if we did this, and bring them ideas? And if you bring them ideas and they approve it, then you move on with your project. So Hatopia Paradise Springs in LA County jumped through a lot of hoops, but they did an amazing job at working with the system to create a spectacular environment out there.
Yeah, definitely. Daryl mentioned that he'll just let Joe know he can't make the weekly meeting. So
I'll talk to Jay and tell him you've got to be on this one instead.
So, but yeah, I mean, glamping's becoming, I mean, it already is such a huge part of the camping segment, and it's just growing all the time. And that partnership is just one way to get your feet wet, I guess, in there. I know we've seen some partnerships like that work in other states, mainly at state parks, but it's great to see the private owners be able to have something like that where they can get the tents and not have to invest a ton of money. So to see if it works or not. So
it is, you know, and adding glamping to your park it really does make a lot of sense, right? Because you might have grandma and grandpa that have the RV, and then you have a different segment of the family that maybe wants a cabin, and then somebody else wants something different. So you're really able to kind of capture all those demographics, that's great.
Yep. Well, I think that's about everything we had for you, Diana. We weren't going to drill you anymore. I imagine we could probably talk for hours about some of the different things in California. You're just so busy all the time. Hopefully, I know at the conference you had mentioned that you had some open staff positions. Hopefully you're filling those staff positions to get some help in the office.
I haven't solved that problem yet, but I do have a stack of resumes right here. So hopefully one of them will be the winner, right?
Yeah. Well, Mike is looking for a job on the mainland. So maybe Mike.
Well, maybe someday down the road, but they're not going to get me out of here quite yet.
So,
I would love to have somebody on the road, you know, just going out and calling on members. So, you know, if you need that full-time RV position, let me know.
I'm waiting for there to be a call for an RV park association in Hawaii, but I don't see it happening.
Don't they have one?
No, there's I think I've seen 2 to 3 RVs since I've been here. You got to float them over for a big chunk of change, and there's just nowhere to put them. I mean, the glamping is big. I did a story for Glamping America's magazine last month, and glamping in Hawaii is huge. It's exploding.
Yeah,
but not RVs.
Not RVs. Well, maybe if they build a huge bridge, maybe more RVs will travel down there. So. But well, it's been great talking with you, Diana, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Next week we're going to be talking to Bobby Cornwell from the Florida Association, just about their upcoming conference. Their conference is at the beginning of June, and they're excited about everything they have going on for that, and just some of the state stuff that they have going on as well. So hopefully you'll tune in for that, and hopefully everyone has a great rest of the week.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
everybody.
Ben. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Yep. Bye,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone.